And so the way we thought we would organize today's event is that each of our speakers would offer about 10 minutes of comments about the crisis, the proper response from democratic countries and people of goodwill everywhere, and after which we will open it up for questions from you. And so with that, let me turn it over to Puente Ton. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tarek. First of all, I would like everyone here to imagine what it is like to be living in Burma right now. So let's imagine that US military has committed a treasonous coup, throwing out the November election result. Let's imagine that the military has dissolved the three branches of power and consolidated all the powers into the hands of one egotistical, sociopathic commander-in-chief who thinks he is above the law and who thinks military and police are above the law. Let's imagine every single senator, every congressional representative who opposed the coup are in hiding. And those senators that are found get thrown into jail. And imagine that the police and soldiers, instead of protecting you, decided to treat citizens as enemies of the most powerful man. And a few police officers who refuse to follow orders to oppress people, they too are arrested in jail. So imagine that citizens' civil liberties are stripped away overnight. Soldiers and police loyal to the commander-in-chief can march into any household and search or seize anything or anyone at will without any warrant. Anyone can be held by the military and police for any length of time without reason. So reporters and activists are in hiding as well. At night, you can't sleep because you fear the knocking of the police. You fear that the police may be coming to arrest you for your refusal to serve the coup makers. And jails have been emptied and criminals are released into the streets. So you stay awake all night. You live in fear that there might be some drugged up criminals or arsonists who are throwing around Molotov cocktails in the neighborhoods. And even when you caught the arsonists, police refuse to arrest them and let the arsonists go free. You feel like a kidnapped victim and you express that outrage you feel on social media. Only the internet is shut down. And this internet shutdowns prevents you from knowing whether your loved ones are safe. So you try to organize and mobilize against these injustices. And coup makers intercept your phone calls and your text messages. Any criticism you write online against these injustices are offenses that can land you in jail. So you bang your pots and pans at 8 p.m. every night to express this frustration. And even that offense of banging the pots in your own home can land you in jail for 6 months. And it is worse than the scariest dystopian movie. This is the reality of the unarmed 54 million people in Myanmar are living through since February 1st. And that is the reality that China has called a cabinet reshuffle. And I know that outrage that millions of people in Myanmar are experiencing, because my family and I have experienced firsthand of it. And we witnessed it when the Burmese military brutality 33 years ago, when the soldiers gunned down hundreds of unarmed protesters right in front of our apartment. And we too have experienced that fear of soldiers carrying bayoneted guns, march into our apartments without warrant and searching. And soldiers waited at the hospital to arrest anyone with a gunshot wound that people did not dare to go to the hospital. My mom, being a physician, treated wounded protesters in the basement of a church, in which was considered a crime that we had to flee the country. And 33 years later, it feels like a bad deja vu because the mindset of the military and the police hasn't changed yet. But there is one giant difference. Everyone have access to smartphones and social media. And this freedom, this shortest, slightest freedom that was experienced by young people in Myanmar over the last decade has kind of given courage to this new generation of digital savvy activists. Today, information flows at the speed of light. We were worried when the commander-in-chief of Myanmar was repeating the exact words of the 45th president of the United States around the voter fraud. We were anticipating and preparing for the worst. But what is happening today in Myanmar is not really about Aung San Suu Kyi or Mein Aung Hlaing as much. It is about a different future without authoritarian regime where people live without fear. People of Myanmar are just fed up of men with guns oppressing the country since 1962. So we have estimated 500,000 military personnel with guns that has been holding the country hostage for this entire population of 54 million people. People's fear of returning to the dark days is a much bigger fear than being killed by the military at the moment. I know the mothers in Myanmar who are saying, we know what it's like to live under the fear of military and police. That era of fear, that era of oppression has to end now. And these women and young people of Myanmar are saying enough. Armed with smartphones and social medias, they're using the two Koreas as an example. They say, either we overthrow the authoritarian regime once and for all and grow to be prosperous like South Korea, or else future generations down the road will still have to live under fear like North Korea. So they started this nonviolent civil disobedience movement called the CDM, led by civil servants, which is gaining traction across the countries. Multi-generations are working together to reject the military coup and the military rules of the country. And the unity, creativity, and diversity of this current movement is truly inspiring. When the commander-in-chief decided to throw out NLD's landslide win from November elections, he had not anticipated the civil disobedience movement. He had not anticipated this nationwide uprising led by the Generation Z. He had not anticipated these fearless young people. He had not anticipated the disobedient civil servants. He was just following the previous dictator's playbook. And in Myanmar, military is a privileged caste. It's a caste system. In order to isolate the military caste from the civilians, military personnel in Myanmar have their own hospitals, their own banks, their own golf courses, all in these isolated gated communities, compounds of military all over the country. Those in the military were not allowed to listen to shortwave radios in the past for fear of overhearing BBC Burmese news. But today, military personnel are not as isolated as before because of smartphones and social media. Soldiers and police have access to the same information on social media that everyone else have. So soldiers and police may lie that millions of people are supporting them, but they really do know how millions of citizens really feel about the impunity culture of the military. We are hoping that the social media and smartphones in the hands of courageous citizens could be the catalyzing difference that support the people of Myanmar's efforts to end authoritarian rule. We are at a fork in the road right now. With international pressure, this civil disobedience movement can succeed. When we finally manage to overthrow the regime once and for all, we need to be forging a truly federal democratic country out of the ashes of the last 60 years of military rule. And this time we need to build back better, not a compromised democracy of the most recent era with the tenuous power sharing deal with the military. This time we need peace with equal rights and citizenship for all our marginalized ethnic and religious communities. We need an end to the culture of impunity for the military, this institution that has committed gross violations of people's human rights and mass atrocities over the decades. And we need to shift power from the men with guns to women with smartphones. And this alternative to this is the darkness that we have been living in, not just over these last few heartbreaking weeks, but the decades of oppression that preceded it. So my appeal to all of you is to please stand with the courageous people of Myanmar. Thank you.